The space station floated in the darkness between stars, like a small island in an endless ocean. They called it neutral ground because it belonged to no one and everyone at the same time. Humans and Virith lived here together, trying to learn if two species so different could ever become friends. Yuna walked through the metal hallways with a bag of treats in her hand. She was 28 years old, small even by human standards, with kind eyes and a smile that came easily. She worked as a medic on the station, but lately she had taken on another job that no one else wanted. She was going to the nursery. The other humans thought she was crazy. The Virith cubs were not like human children. They were covered in thick fur, had claws that could cut through steel, and teeth that could crush bone. Even young, they were dangerous. But when Yuna looked at them, she did not see monsters. She saw children who were scared and far from home. The door to the nursery slid open with a soft sound. 6 cubs looked up at her with bright yellow eyes. The smallest one, a female named Bora, hid behind her brothers. The largest, a male called Taiho, stepped forward and growled low in his throat. Yuna did not run. She did not show fear. She simply sat down on the floor and opened her bag. "I brought something for you," she said softly. "Dried meat from Earth. I thought you might like to try it." Taiho sniffed the air. His growl faded into curiosity. One by one, the cubs crept closer. Bora was the last to approach, her small nose twitching as she smelled the strange food. This had become their daily routine. Every afternoon, Yuna came to the nursery. She brought treats, told stories, and simply sat with them. At first, the cubs had snarled and snapped at her. Now they pressed against her sides and listened to her voice like it was music. Elder Korath watched from the doorway. He was old, his gray fur marked with scars from battles long past. As the pack leader, it was his duty to protect the cubs. And he did not trust this human. Humans were strange creatures. They had no fur to keep them warm, no claws to defend themselves, no fangs to hunt. They lived short lives and died easily. Yet they had spread across the stars faster than any other species. Korath did not understand them, and what he did not understand, he did not trust. But he could not deny what he saw. The cubs were calmer around this female. They slept better. They ate more. Whatever magic she possessed, it was working. Yuna noticed him watching and smiled. "Would you like to join us, Elder?" I was about to tell them a story. Korath said nothing. He simply turned and walked away. That night, Yuna sat in the common room with her friend Doan. He was tall and thin, with rough hands from years of working with machines. As the station's engineer, he kept everything running. As Yuna's friend, he kept her grounded. "You spend too much time with those cubs," he said, pushing a cup of tea toward her. "The other humans are talking. They think you have lost your mind." Yuna wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "Let them talk. Someone needs to show the Virith that we are not just useful. We can be kind too. Time does not keep you alive out here." Dohan leaned back in his chair. The Virith respects strength, not kindness. Maybe that is because no one has ever shown them what kindness can do. Doan shook his head, but he was smiling. He had known Yuna for 5 years. He knew that once she decided something, nothing could change her mind. It was one of the things he loved about her, even if it drove him crazy. The next morning, Yuna returned to the nursery with a new story. She told the cubs about Earth, about the forests and mountains and oceans. She told them about wolves, creatures that looked a little like the Virith, with fur and fangs and pack bonds that lasted forever. Long ago, she said, humans were afraid of wolves. We hunted them. We drove them away. But then something changed. We learned to understand them. We learned that they were not so different from us. They loved their families. They protected their young. They were loyal until death. Laura crawled into Yuna's lap, her small body warm against Yuna's legs. What happened to the wolves? Some of them became our friends. We call them dogs now. They live with us, play with us, protect us. They are part of our families. Yuna stroked Bora's fur gently. We learned that being different does not mean being enemies. It just means we have more to learn about each other. The cubs listened with wide eyes. They had never heard stories like this. Their own history was full of battles and blood, of strength and survival. The idea that two species could become family was strange and wonderful. Taiho moved closer, his earlier distrust forgotten. Do you think Verith and humans could be like that? Like wolves and humans? Yuna smiled. I think we already are. Look at us now. From that day forward, the cubs began calling her soft sister. It was a name of affection, a name that meant she belonged to them, even though she was not Verith. When she arrived at the nursery, they would rush to greet her. When she left, they would press their noses against the window and watch until she disappeared. Elder Korath continued to watch. He watched how Yuna handled the cubs when they fought, calming them with soft words instead of sharp commands. He watched how she cleaned their wounds and checked their teeth without fear. He watched how she held Bora when the small cub cried at night, singing human songs until she fell asleep. One evening, he found Yuna in the hallway outside the nursery. She was tired, her eyes heavy, but she was still smiling. Why do you do this? He asked. It was the first time he had spoken directly to her. Yuna looked up at him. Because they need someone to love them. And I have love to give. Korath studied her for a long moment. In Verith culture, love was something earned through strength and sacrifice. You did not give it freely. You did not waste it on those outside your pack. But this human gave her love like it was endless. Like it cost her nothing. Like there was always more. You are strange, he said finally. So I have been told. She walked past him toward her quarters, leaving Korath alone with his thoughts. He looked through the window at the sleeping cubs, piled together in a warm heap of fur and claws. Bora was in the center, a small smile on her face. For the first time in many years, Korath felt something he could not name. It was not trust, not yet, but it was close. That night, as the station drifted through the silent darkness of space, something was changing. Walls that had stood for centuries were beginning to crack. Fear was giving way to curiosity. Suspicion was softening into something that might one day become friendship. And at the center of it all was a small human woman who believed that kindness was the strongest weapon in the universe. She did not know that soon she would have to prove it. 3 months passed on the station. The cold metal walls became familiar. The hum of the engines became a lullaby. For Yuna, neutral ground had become home, and the cubs had become her family. But peace never lasts forever in the darkness between stars. It started with whispers. The adult Verith would gather in corners and speak in low voices that stopped whenever a human walked by. The station commander held meetings behind closed doors. Security teams began patrolling the hallways in pairs instead of alone. Yuna noticed the change but did not understand it. When she asked Dowan, his face grew serious. There is a group called the Hollow Tide, he said quietly. Exiled Verith who abandoned pack law. They raid colonies and stations. They take what they want and kill anyone who stands in their way. What do they want? Dowan hesitated. They have been spotted 2 systems away, heading in our direction. A cold feeling settled in Yuna's stomach. The cubs. Are they in danger? Everyone is in danger. That night, Yuna went to the nursery and found Elder Korath already there. He was speaking to the cubs in their native language, his voice gentle but firm. When he saw Yuna, he switched to the common tongue. The young ones will be confined to the inner quarters until the threat has passed. You will stay with them as their guardian. Yuna nodded. I understand. Korath looked at her with something close to respect. You could leave. The escape pods are ready. The other humans are already making plans to flee if the hollow tide attacks. I will not leave them. Why? They are not your pack. They are not your blood. You owe them nothing. Yuna knelt down and pulled Bora into her arms. The small cub pressed against her chest, trembling slightly. They are my family. That is reason enough. Korath stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and left without another word. The next few days were filled with preparation. The Varath warriors sharpened their claws and checked their weapons. The station's shields were strengthened. Emergency protocols were reviewed again and again. Doan came to the nursery with a box in his hands. Inside was a plasma pistol, small enough to fit in Yuna's palm, but powerful enough to burn through armor. Take this, he said, pressing it into her hands. Yuna looked at the weapon with wide eyes. I have never fired a gun in my life. Point and press the trigger. That is all you need to know. Doan's voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. You probably will not need it, but I want you to have it. Just in case. Doan. He pulled her into a tight hug before she could finish. Stay safe. Stay alive. That is an order. Yuna hugged him back, feeling tears burn in her eyes. You too. After he left, she sat alone in the nursery with the pistol in her lap. The cubs were sleeping, their soft breathing filling the room. They did not know what was coming. They did not understand the danger. Yuna made a silent promise to keep it that way. The attack came 3 nights later. Yuna was telling the cubs a bedtime story when the lights flickered. The station groaned like a wounded animal. Then came the explosions, distant but growing closer. The cubs woke instantly, their ears flat against their heads, their claws extended. Taiho jumped to his feet and bared his teeth at the door. What is happening? Bora whimpered, pressing herself against Yuna's side. Stay calm, Yuna said, even though her heart was pounding. Stay behind me. She ran to the communication panel and pressed the emergency button. Static. She tried again. Nothing. The hollow tide had cut off their communications. Another explosion shook the station. The lights went out completely, leaving only the dim red glow of emergency power. In the darkness, the cubs began to cry. Yuna pulled out the plasma pistol with trembling hands. She had no training. She had no experience. She was just a medic who told bedtime stories and brought treats to children. But she was all they had. Listen to me, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. We are going to stay in this room. We are going to lock the door. And no matter what happens, no one is going to take you. Do you understand? The cubs nodded, their yellow eyes glowing in the darkness. Yuna began to barricade the door. She pushed furniture against it, stacked crates and chairs, created a wall between the cubs and whatever was coming. Her arms burned with the effort, but she did not stop. The sounds of battle grew louder. Screams echoed through the hallways. Gunfire crackled like thunder. The station that had been her home was becoming a battlefield. Taiho helped her move the heavy objects, using his strength to shift things Yuna could never lift alone. The other cubs huddled in the corner, holding each other, trying to be brave. When the barricade was finished, Yuna stood in front of the door and waited. Minutes passed. Or maybe hours. Time lost all meaning in the darkness. Then she heard footsteps. Heavy. Slow. Getting closer. A face appeared in the small window of the door. A Varath, but wrong somehow. His fur was matted and dirty. His eyes were wild. Scars covered his face like a map of violence. He smiled when he saw Yuna standing there with her tiny pistol. A human? His voice was rough, amused. They left a human to guard the cubs? Yuna's hands were shaking, but she did not lower the weapon. Leave this place. You are not welcome here." The raider laughed. It was an ugly sound. "Step aside, little creature. We want only the young ones. Give them to us, and we will let you live." Behind her, Bora whimpered. Yuna heard the other cubs crying softly. Something changed inside her then. The fear was still there, but it was pushed aside by something stronger. Something fierce and ancient and utterly human. "You will not touch them," she said. Her voice did not shake. "You will not take them. You will have to go through me first." The raider stopped laughing. He studied her with new interest. "You would die for cubs that are not even your own kind." "Yes." He tilted his head, confused by this strange creature who showed no fear. Then he shrugged or raised his clawed hand. "So be it." He began to break down the door. Yun raised the pistol, aimed at the window, and waited. Behind her, the cubs were silent now, watching their soft sister with wide eyes. The door began to crack. Yuna took a deep breath, and then she fired. The plasma bolt hit the raider in the shoulder. He howled in pain and stumbled backward, smoke rising from the wound. Yuna did not wait. She fired again and again, each shot wild but desperate. The raider fell against the wall, cursing in his native tongue. But he was not dead. He was not even stopped. He was just angry. "You will pay for that," he snarled, and threw himself against the door. The metal bent. The barricade shifted. Yuna braced herself against it, pushing back with all her strength. It was not enough. She was small. She was weak. She was human, but she did not move. Another blow. The door groaned. A crack appeared in the frame. Through the gap, Yuna could see more raiders coming down the hallway. 2, 3, 4 of them, all scarred and savage, all hungry for blood. "Taiho," she called without looking back. "Take the others to the far corner. Get behind the storage containers. Cannot come out no matter what. But soft sister, now." The cubs obeyed, their claws clicking on the metal floor as they ran. Yuna stood alone at the door, her pistol raised, her body blocking the only way in. The first raider finally broke through. He burst into the room like a storm, claws slashing. Yuna ducked under his arm and fired into his chest. He roared and grabbed her by the shoulder, his claws sinking deep into her flesh. Pain exploded through her body. She screamed but did not fall. She pressed the pistol against his throat and pulled the trigger. He dropped. The second raider was already coming. Yuna spun to face him, blood pouring down her arm. Her vision was blurring. Her legs were shaking, but she could hear the cubs crying behind her, and that sound gave her strength she did not know she had. She fired, missed, fired again, hit him in the leg. He stumbled and fell, and she put another bolt in his head before he could get up. The third raider was smarter. He waited in the doorway, watching her with cold eyes. He could see she was wounded. He could see she was running out of energy. All he had to do was wait. "You are brave," he said. "Stupid, but brave. Why do you fight so hard for creatures that are not your own?" Yuna pressed her hand against her bleeding shoulder, trying to stop the flow. "Because someone has to. They will not remember you. When you are dead and they are grown, they will forget the human who tried to save them. Is that worth dying for?" Yuna thought of Bora, small and scared and hiding in the corner. She thought of Taiho, trying so hard to be strong. She thought of all the bedtime stories and afternoon treats and quiet moments that had become her whole world. "Yes," she said. "It is." The raider shook his head sadly, like she was a child who did not understand the way things worked. Then he charged. Yuna was too slow this time. His claws caught her across the side, tearing through her uniform and into her flesh. She fell hard, the pistol flying from her hand. Pain washed over her like a wave, and for a moment everything went dark. When she opened her eyes, the raider was standing over her, his claws raised for the killing blow. Behind him, she saw the cubs watching through the gaps in the storage containers. Bora was crying silently, her small paws pressed against her mouth. No, Yuna thought. Not like this. Not in front of them. She reached out blindly, and her fingers found the pistol. She did not aim. She did not think. She just pulled the trigger again and again until the weapon clicked empty. The raider fell on top of her, his weight crushing her into the floor. She could not breathe. She could not move. But she could hear a voice screaming, and after a moment she realized it was coming from the hallway. Fall back. Fall back. The defenders are coming. The fourth raider fled. Yuna heard his footsteps fading into the distance. She heard the sound of fighting moving away from the nursery. She heard explosions and gunfire and the roar of Vareth warriors finally arriving, but she could not move. The dead raider was too heavy. The blood was leaving her body too fast. The darkness was creeping in at the edges of her vision. Small hands touched her face. Small voices called her name. Soft sister. Soft sister, wake up. The cubs had left their hiding place. They were gathered around her, trying to push the raider's body off her, crying and calling for help. Teho was the strongest. He grabbed the raider by the arm and pulled with all his might. The others joined him, 6 small cubs working together, and slowly, the body rolled away. Yuna gasped for air. Blood bubbled on her lips. She tried to speak, but no words came. Thora pressed her face against Yuna's cheek. Her tears were warm and wet. Do not leave us. Please, do not leave us. Yuna wanted to tell her it was okay. She wanted to say that everything would be fine. But the darkness was too strong now. It pulled her down into silence. The last thing she saw was Bora's eyes, wide and golden and full of love. Then there was nothing. The reinforcements found them minutes later. Dohan was first through the door, his face white with terror. He saw the bodies. He saw the blood. He saw Yuna lying broken on the floor with 6 cubs huddled around her like a shield. Medic! He screamed. Someone get a medic! He fell to his knees beside her and pressed his hands against her wounds. Her blood soaked through his fingers, warm and red, and far too much. Stay with me, he whispered. Yuna, please. Stay with me. The cubs would not leave her side. When the medical team arrived, they had to work around them. Bora sat at Yuna's head, stroking her hair with gentle claws. Taiho stood guard at her feet, growling at anyone who moved too quickly. Elder Korath arrived last. He stood in the doorway for a long time, staring at the scene before him. 3 dead raiders. A broken barricade. A small human woman who had faced an army alone. She held the door, someone said. By herself. She held the door. Korath said nothing. He walked slowly through the room, studying each body, reading the story they told. The fight had been brutal. The human had been completely outmatched. But she had not run. She had not surrendered. She had stood and bled and killed until there was nothing left. He stopped beside her broken body and looked down. Her face was pale. Her breathing was shallow. The medics were working frantically, but Korath had seen enough death to know she might not survive. She is Pack, he said quietly. From this moment forward, she is Pack. The cubs heard him. They pressed closer to their soft sister, and they did not cry anymore. They had work to do. They moved Yuna to the medical bay, but the cubs refused to be separated from her. When the adults tried to carry them away, they snarled and snapped with a fierceness that shocked everyone. These were not the playful children they had known. These were protectors. These were guardians. In the end, the medical team gave up trying to remove them. They set up Yuna's bed in the corner of the nursery instead, surrounded by monitors and machines that beeped with every heartbeat. The cubs arranged themselves around her like soldiers defending a castle. Bora took the position closest to Yuna's head. She lay with her small body pressed against the bed, her eyes never leaving Yuna's face. Taiho stood at the door, his young muscles tense, ready to fight anyone who threatened their soft sister. The other 4 cubs filled the spaces between, creating a wall of fur and claws and love. Night fell over the station. The battle was over. The hollow tide had been driven back, their ships burning in the darkness of space. But victory brought no celebration. Too many had died. Too many were hurt, and Yuna was still unconscious. Doan sat in a chair beside her bed, holding her hand. His eyes were red from crying, but no more tears came. He had already emptied himself of them. Now he just waited, watching the rise and fall of her chest, counting each breath like a prayer. She should not have survived, the Verith doctor said quietly. The blood loss alone should have killed her. I do not understand how she lasted until we arrived. Dawan looked at Yuna's pale face. She made a promise. She never breaks her promises. Elder Korath came to the nursery that night. He moved slowly, as if carrying a great weight. The cubs watched him approach but did not growl. They recognized him. They trusted him. He stood at the foot of Yuna's bed for a long time, studying her broken body. The bandages covered most of her wounds, but he could see the blood that had soaked through. He could smell the damage that had been done. How bad is it? He asked. The doctor hesitated. Our body is fighting, but humans are fragile. They heal slowly. If she survives the night, she has a chance. If not, Korath nodded slowly. He turned to look at the cubs, at their fierce little faces and determined eyes. What are they doing? They will not leave her. They say they are guarding her. Guarding her from what? Bora's voice was small but steady. From death. If death comes for Soft Sister, it will have to go through us. Korath felt something crack inside his chest. He was old. He had lived through wars and famines and losses too numerous to count. He had learned to keep his heart hard and cold, protected by walls of duty and tradition. But these cubs, these small warriors, were breaking those walls with nothing but love. He knelt down slowly, his old bones creaking. The cubs watched him with cautious eyes. He had never knelt before anyone. It was not the Verith way. You do her great honor, he said softly. She would be proud. Bora's eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry. Cubs did not cry during a vigil. It was pack law. She bled for us. We will guard her until she wakes, and if she does not wake, then we will guard her forever. Korath bowed his head. Something was changing inside him. Something old and stubborn finally giving way. This human woman had done what no one else could do. She had shown his pack what true loyalty looked like. Not loyalty born from duty or fear, but loyalty born from love. He began to sing Dot. It was an ancient song, older than the stars. A song for pack. A song for family. A song that called the spirits of all who had died protecting their loved ones. Verith only sang it for their greatest warriors. The cubs looked at him with wide eyes. They had never heard this song before. It was only for adults, only for the honored dead. But Korath kept singing. Slowly, hesitantly, the cubs joined him. Their voices were young and uncertain, but they found the melody and held on to it. The song filled the room, filled the hallway, drifted through the broken station like a promise. Doan did not understand the words, but he understood the meaning. Tears began to fall down his face again. He squeezed Yuna's hand and added his own voice to the song, humming along even though he did not know the tune. Other Verith heard the singing and came to the nursery. They stood in the doorway, watching the strange scene before them. An old elder, 6 small cubs, a crying human, And in the center of it all, a broken woman who had faced death to save children that were not her own. One by one, the Vareth joined the song. Their deep voices blended with the cubs' high ones, creating a sound that was beautiful and sad and fierce all at once. The song lasted until dawn, when the first light of the artificial sunrise crept through the windows. The monitors beside Yuna's bed began to change. Her heartbeat grew stronger. Her breathing deepened. Color returned to her pale cheeks. The doctor rushed to check the readings, his eyes wide with disbelief. She is stabilizing. She is actually stabilizing. Bora lifted her head, her eyes bright with hope. Soft, sister? Yuna's fingers twitched. Her eyelids fluttered. She did not wake, but she was fighting. She was coming back. The cubs did not cheer. They did not celebrate. They simply settled closer to her bed and closed their eyes at last. They had done their duty. They had guarded her through the night. Now they could rest. Teho was the last to sleep. He walked slowly to Yuna's side and pressed his nose against her hand. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for not leaving us." Then he curled up at her feet and let the exhaustion take him. Korath watched the cubs sleep, piled around their soft sister like a blanket of fur and claws. He had lived for many years. He had seen many things, but he had never seen anything like this. A human who fought like a Vareth. Cubs who kept vigil like warriors. The universe was full of strange wonders, but this was the strangest and most wonderful of all. He stayed until the sun was fully risen. Then he walked to the doorway and stopped. Without looking back, he spoke to Dohan. "She is packed now. Wherever she goes, whatever she needs, my people will provide. This is not a gift. It is a debt we can never repay." Dohan nodded, unable to speak. Korath left, his footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. Behind him, Yuna slept on, surrounded by 6 small guardians who had refused to let her face the darkness alone. 7 days after the attack, Yuna opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was fur. Soft, warm, gray fur pressed against her face. She blinked slowly, trying to remember where she was. Her body felt heavy and strange, wrapped in bandages and connected to machines that hummed quietly in the dim light. She tried to move, and pain shot through her side. She gasped, and the fur beside her stirred. Mora's face appeared above her, golden eyes wide with shock. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Bora let out a sound that was half cry, half howl, and threw herself onto Yuna's chest. "Soft sister. Soft sister is awake." The other cubs woke instantly. They scrambled over each other to reach her, their tails wagging, their voices rising in a chorus of joy. Taiho pressed his forehead against her hand. The others licked her face and nuzzled her arms and cried the tears they had been holding for 7 long days. Yuna laughed, then winced as the movement pulled at her wounds. "I am okay," she whispered. "I am okay. Please do not jump on me." But she was crying too. She held Bora close and let the tears fall, not caring who saw. She was alive. The cubs were safe. Nothing else mattered. Dohan burst through the door moments later, his face wild with hope. When he saw Yuna's eyes open, he stopped. His legs seemed to give out beneath him. He grabbed the door frame to keep from falling. "You stubborn fool," he said, his voice breaking. "You absolute stubborn fool." Yuna smiled weakly. "I learned from the best." He crossed the room in 3 steps and wrapped his arms around her, careful to avoid her wounds. The cubs made room for him, pressing against their sides, creating a pile of humans in Vareth that was messy and warm and perfect. Elder Korath arrived an hour later. The cubs had finally calmed down, though Bora refused to leave Yuna's lab. The old Vareth stood in the doorway, studying the scene with an expression Yuna could not read. "You are awake," he said. "So it seems." He walked slowly to her bedside and knelt. Yuna's eyes went wide. She had learned enough about Vareth culture to know that elders never knelt. It was a gesture of profound respect, given only to the greatest warriors. "Elder, please." "You do not need to, I do." He raised his head and met her eyes. "You stood at the door when everyone else fled. You bled for cubs that were not your own. You fought until your body broke, and still you did not surrender." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "And when you lay dying, these small ones refused to leave your side. They guarded you through the night. They sang the warrior's song for you." Yuna looked down at Bora, who was watching with serious eyes. "They did what?" "They kept vigil. A tradition older than our history. It is only done for the greatest heroes of our people." Korath reached out and placed a clawed hand gently on her arm. "You were not Pack. You owed us nothing, but you stood anyway. And because of that, everything has changed." He told her then what had happened while she slept. The story of her stand at the door had spread across the station, then across the system, then across the galaxy. A human woman, small and fragile and untrained, had killed 3 hollow-tide raiders to protect Vareth cubs. It was impossible. It was unbelievable. It was true. The Vareth, who had always seen humans as weak and strange, were looking at them differently now. Trade agreements that had stalled for years were suddenly moving forward. Military alliances that seemed impossible were being discussed. All because one woman had shown that humans would bleed for those they loved, even if those they loved were not human. "You have done more for peace between our people than 100 diplomats could do in 100 years, Korath said. "And for that, I owe you a debt that can never be repaid." Yuna shook her head. "I did not do it for peace. I did it for them." She stroked Bora's fur gently. "I would do it again." Korath smiled. It was a strange expression on his scarred face, but it was genuine. "I know. That is why it matters." He stood slowly and looked at the cubs. "From this day forward, Yuna is Pack. She carries the blood bond. Whatever she needs, wherever she goes, the Vareth will protect her as she protected our young." Taiho stepped forward, his young face solemn. "She has always been Pack. We knew it before you did." Korath laughed, a deep rumbling sound that filled the room. "Yes, I suppose you did." The weeks that followed were difficult. Yuna's wounds healed slowly, and there were days when the pain made her cry. But she was never alone. The cubs took turns staying by her side, bringing her food and telling her stories and making sure she did not feel sorry for herself. Dowan visited every day. He brought her books and games and news from the outside world. He held her hand when the nights were long and listened when she needed to talk. "I was so scared," she admitted one evening. "When they broke through the door, I thought I was going to die. I thought I would fail them, but you did not." "No." She looked at her hands, remembering the weight of the pistol. "I do not know where I found the strength. I just knew I could not let them take the cubs. I could not let them down." Dowan squeezed her hand. "That is what makes you special. You love so hard that you forget to be afraid." 2 months later, Yuna was cleared to travel. Her wounds had healed, leaving scars that would stay with her forever. The doctors on Earth wanted to see her, and there were medals to receive and speeches to give. She was a hero now, whether she wanted to be or not. But there was a problem. Bora would not let her go. "I am coming with you," the small cub said, her voice stubborn and sure. "Wherever Soft Sister goes, I go." Yuna tried to explain that Earth was far away, that it was a human world, that Bora belonged with her pack. But the cub would not listen. She had made up her mind, and nothing would change it. In the end, Elder Korath made the decision. Let her go. She has earned the right to choose her own path. So when Yuna boarded the ship to Earth, she was not alone. Bora sat beside her, looking out the window at the stars with wide, excited eyes. The journey took 3 weeks. They talked and played games and told each other stories. Yuna taught Bora about Earth, about oceans and mountains and forests full of creatures that looked almost like Vorath. Bora taught Yuna about Varath history, about the old heroes and the ancient songs. By the time they arrived, they were more than friends. They were family. Earth was overwhelming. The crowds, the noise, the cameras that flashed everywhere they went. People stared at Bora with fear and curiosity, but the small Varath just pressed closer to Yuna's side and stared right back. At the spaceport, a small human child pointed at Bora with wide eyes. "Mommy, what is that?" Yuna smiled and answered before the mother could speak. Her voice was calm and proud and full of love. "Family." The mother blinked in surprise. The child giggled and waved at Bora. And Bora, after a moment of hesitation, waved back. Yuna took Bora's paw in her hand and walked forward into the sunlight. Behind them, the ship that had brought them from the stars powered down its engines. Ahead of them, a whole world waited to be explored. They did not know what the future would bring. They did not know if peace between humans and Varath would last, or if there would be more battles to fight. They only knew that they had each other. And sometimes, that was enough. Sometimes, that was everything. The story of Yuna and the cubs spread across the galaxy. It was told in bars and boardrooms, in schools and ships, in every corner of known space. People added details that were not true and forgot details that were. But the heart of the story stayed the same. A human woman stood at a door. She bled for children who were not her own. And those children guarded her. Until morning. It became a legend. It became a promise. It became the moment everything changed. And somewhere, on a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary star, a scarred woman and a furry cub walked hand in paw into a future that no one had thought possible. Together. Forever. Pack.